A black shadow seemed to pass like an arm above him. It missed a Monhen and groped out west and faded. Then all the sky was clean and blue, and birds sang in every tree. Frodo looked around him, seeing true nature once again. He had just taken off the one ring on a Monhen, and realized it had almost dominated his will. "I know what I must do," Frodo said to himself. He began to hurry towards the Anduin. "They will understand. I must do this alone." As Frodo hurried with his hobbit silence, he could hear his friends calling his name. Soon he made it to the boats in Parth Galen, alongside the river. Moving one boat into the river, he heard a great cry in the distance. "Frodo, wait!" "Sam!" Frodo cried, knowing that he had been caught. Turning to see his companion, Frodo suddenly heard the monstrous sounds of many footsteps, the clank of swords and armor, and many horns beginning to sound. "Hurry, Sam!" Frodo cried, realizing the enemy, either of Mordor or Isengard, was upon them. Before long, the entire shore was surrounded by Uruk-hai, warg-riders, and half-orcs. Little did the two hobbits know that hundreds, even thousands of orcs and Uruk-hai were in the forest around them, and their companions were already engaged in combat. "You will not touch him!" Sam yelled, drawing his sword. "Go, Mr. Frodo!" As the brave hobbit charged into the ranks of Uruk-hai, Frodo reluctantly tried to paddle his boat away, but it was no use. Sam had already been captured by these White-Hand Uruks, while to the north Boromir fell in defense of Pippin and Merry. Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas fought hard in the forest, and kept their lives as they were looking for the hobbits. Frodo and his canoe from Lothlorien came to the middle of the river and stayed, as the ring-bearer noticed that the other bank of the river had many dozens of orcs on them as well. "The quest is lost. I have failed," Frodo thought to himself. "Well, I shan't let them have the ring or me." Frodo let the boat drift towards the falls of Rauros. Maybe there will come another day, and another ring-bearer who finds the ring downriver. Maybe he will continue the quest and have a mentor to guide him. Frodo suddenly thought of Gandalf, and his heart stung. Lost in thought, he hadn't even noticed his boat being pulled back to the western shore until it was almost there. In fear, he looked into the waters to see goblin swimmers guiding the canoe. It was too late. The four hobbits were taken by warg-riders back to Isengard, while the army of Uruk-hai, orcs, goblins, and half-orcs followed far behind, returning to their master in Orthanc. Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas had survived the encounter near a Monhen, as they fought until many horns sounded in retreat. They knew the hobbits had been captured, and the army had retreated. They assumed the title of the Three Hunters, and chased the army through the east-imnent of Rohan. Aragorn concluded that Saruman had been determined to get the One Ring, so he had made an agile army of 2,000 to send after the Fellowship. "What shall we do if we catch up with them?" Gimli asked. "He is right. We cannot overtake thousands by ourselves," Legolas added. Aragorn brooded in thought over this question, as the three ran many leagues. Finally he responded, "We shall wait for the cover of night and sneak into their camp. We will set the hobbits free and fight if we must. If we cannot avenge Boromir's sacrifice, then we shall fall as he did, in the defense of friends against an overwhelming tide of darkness." They were never given the opportunity, however, as the warg-riders rode into the Ring of Isengard nearly 4 days after the battle at Monhen. If a warg or its rider became too tired on the journey, they were left behind for the riders of Rohan to deal with. Saruman was pleased in receiving his gifts. "So, you are the 4 hobbits that Gandalf sent to doom. I am sorry that he put you through this venture, and abandoned you partway through." "He didn't abandon us," Sam roared through his tears. "He fell into the abyss of Moria to save us." Saruman gazed at Sam's defiance. "You are a brave one, my hobbit. But even the strongest tree must break in the storm that engulfs the world. All of you know what I seek, and I can feel it. It's malice, dread, and power." Saruman turned his eyes to Frodo. "Give it to me, halfling. so that I may defeat Sauron and save this world, as was my intended purpose." Frodo knew this was a lie. Gandalf had told him of the Order of the Istari, and that the wizards were meant to be advisors, not rulers. Still, Frodo felt so great a pull and persuasion that he could not resist. He extended his hand, against the will of the other hobbits, and sealed the fate of Arda. Aragorn and his friends came across the site of a great battle, where both riders of Rohan and Uruk-hai littered the ground. They found that almost everyone involved in this battle outside the eaves of Fangorn had been slain, but there were no hobbit bodies, so they continued. Coming quickly into Fangorn, Gimli begged his companions for a slight rest. "We have been running for days with hardly any sleep, food, or sign of our quarry," Gimli panted. A voice of strength, renewal, and hope suddenly came. "You will need much more than that to save Middle-earth, my good dwarf." The three hunters turned to find the White Wizard. After moments of confusion, they came to realize it was Gandalf, returned from death. "We must move quickly. With the ring, Saruman will cause great chaos in this world. Aragorn, you must take the paths of the dead, and bring what forces you will find in South Gondor to Minas Tirith. Sauron is no longer the greatest threat to this world, so Gondor's forces must come west to face Saruman." Aragorn nodded and agreed with these instructions. "You will not be alone long, as Galadriel has sent word to your kin in Eriador to come to your aid. They will be known as the Grey Company if you find them. But you mustn't wait for them. They will find you. As for you two, Legolas and Gimli, I send you now to Edoras. You must find a way to rouse the king, or his lands will not last long." "Where will you go?" asked Legolas. "Most likely to my doom. I go now to confront Saruman, and try to reason with him. However, I have a friend I must see first. Let us disband, and with all hope and strength, bring the world into a better day." Gandalf quickly ran deeper into the forest, while Shadowfax roamed outside. Aragorn bade his friends farewell, going now southward at a ranger's pace. Legolas and Gimli went then, with all haste, to Edoras. A few days later, Gandalf rode Shadowfax swiftly to Isengard. "So, now you see true power, don't you, my old friend?" Saruman stood atop the pinnacle of Orthanc, looking downward at Gandalf. "Saruman, this is not our purpose. We are supposed to advise and guide, not dominate and control." Saruman chuckled a harsh and humorless laugh. The effects of the One Ring were already apparent on him. His skin cracked and grayed, his eyes were a dark fire that could pierce any veil, while his robes were like that of a storm, constantly changing colors of the dark abyss. "You disappoint me, Gandalf. I would have allowed you to be my pupil, but instead, you shall serve me with information. You, along with your hobbit friends, shall be tortured until the sun and moon become old, and the world is made anew. Servants, seize this fool." 9 cloaked figures came forth from the shadows of Isengard's ring. "Now, forests, I call you to serve Yavanna and Manwë. Save this world," Gandalf cried. The trees began to crack and move, coming towards Isengard. In fury, Saruman invoked words of wrath, and many bolts of lightning struck the Fangorn forest from newly appeared clouds, causing never-ending fires. "This is only the beginning," Saruman roared as the Ents ran ablaze outside his walls. Gandalf shed many tears, as he was taken by Saruman's Nazgul to the tunnels beneath Orthanc. He realized that Saruman was able to turn the Nazgul from their own master Sauron, as his persuasion had become too great for any beings to withstand. And it seems that they would serve whoever dominated the One Ring, as they serve the ring itself. "Woe to this world," Gandalf said in his last moment under the sky. Saruman's power grew exponentially with every piece of knowledge he received. His armies grew and destroyed Rohan, as Legolas and Gimli were imprisoned by the Rohirrim for trying to rouse Theoden King to fight Isengard. As for Wormtongue, Saruman would use him until he became no longer useful for the downfall of Rohan, and then he would get rid of his servant. Saruman's Uruks were produced quicker, stronger, and smarter, now equaling the power of any man in Rohan. Saruman stayed in Isengard during his conquest, letting the Nazgul lead his armies while he became even more knowledgeable and stronger. Through the Orthanc Palantir, he began to dominate Sauron's mind and learn from him. The Wizard of the Night, as Saruman now called himself, defeated Sauron's forces in the Eastfold. Sauron's army was originally meant to destroy Gondor in what would have been the Siege of Minas Tirith and the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. There was only one hope for the world now, Gondor, as Aragorn had come into his kingship and usurped Denethor's power, mustering an army of 20,000 to now march against Saruman. But, before leading his forces from Minas Tirith to Orthanc in a final struggle, Aragorn gazed into the Anor Palantir at Minas Tirith to master it and see what awaited him. What he saw was fair Númenor that had drowned thousands of years before. He saw Arwen who awaited him in Rivendell. But these images were sown by Saruman. They were true images, but those that manipulated the King of Gondor. They played into Aragorn's driving motivation, hope. Hope for diplomacy was to be his downfall. Rather than lead his men to their doom, as Saruman had shown him the strength of his armies in the Palantir, Aragorn was to come himself to Isengard as Gondor's ambassador, and swear fealty. For this, Saruman promised that he would help Gondor in its endeavor to see Númenor again. Aragorn knew these promises were lies in the depths of his heart, but he didn't have the will to resist them. So he and the Grey Company came to Isengard to instead be captured alongside Gandalf and the hobbits, held and tortured for information. However, Saruman sent word to Gondor that all was well, and Aragorn was to learn from him. Gondor was to start making weaponry for Isengard immediately. At this point, Saruman used the power of his ring and his knowledge to greatly expand his industry to all corners of his territory. Soon after, Saruman personally went to Mordor at the head of his army, and found Mordor to be nearly empty of its forces. A weak, yet still personified Sauron, came to the Black Gates and surrendered to Saruman and his ring. Saruman was immorally delighted by this turn of events, and accepted. Though he was the most powerful being in the lands of Middle-earth, Saruman hadn't realized that Sauron had one more trick to play out. Over the next hundreds of years, Saruman brought industry to all the lands, enslaving Radagast, the elves, dwarves, men, and hobbits alike, while Sauron became his most loyal servant, even his steward. Sauron taught Saruman all he knew, while Saruman planned to continue to grow in power and knowledge, so that even the Valar couldn't defy him. Eventually, Sauron convinced him that there was only one way to beat the Valar, and only one being that could help Saruman do this. So, in the year 3518 of the Third Age, 500 years to the day that Gandalf was first betrayed by Saruman and put atop Orthanc, Saruman, Sauron, and now a broken Gandalf and Radagast created a storm atop the pinnacle of Orthanc. It became so incredibly powerful that the earth itself shook in terror. Lightning and fire ran into the sky, breaking the door of night. Saruman unleashed the greatest evils upon the world, before realizing what he had done. Saruman himself felt fear again. Sauron had victory. In Saruman's pursuits of knowledge and power, he had trusted Sauron's counsel to such an extent that Melkor, the great enemy, and his servants were released upon the world once again. This caused Mandos's prophecy, Dagor Daggerath, the final battle, to actually happen. In the Armageddon of the world, the Valar had to respond to such a threat, resurrecting all of their forces to fight against Melkor's forces, as the vision of Dagor Daggerath foresaw. In the end, though, Sauron nor Saruman had won, as the Free Peoples and the Valar still triumphed, resulting in the beginning of the new universe, with the second music of the Ainur. In the first universe and the next, there would always be hope for renewal. This time, the song would be less tumultuous, and light would shine upon Ilúvatar's children once again. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I'd like to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to hit that like button and share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it. I would like to thank those of you who voted on the Facebook and Twitter polls for this video and so many others to be made. Now, I really wanted to make this theory interesting, and I do think that if Saruman got the One Ring, something like Dagger Daggeroth or another type of world renewal would happen, as there would be so much evil in Arda that would need to be cleansed. Since Saruman is a wizard and is innately powerful already, I would imagine he would become exponentially more so with the One Ring, and in his pursuit of knowledge and power, cause the world as we know it to end. I want to hear what you all think about this theory down below. Would it have happened like this or otherwise? Let me know. Please join us on Facebook and Twitter through the links in the description below to contact me more directly, and make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with my next videos. Next week, I'll have an epic character history on Celebrimbor for you all. As always, thank you all for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my friends.